Hello everyone, this is update for September 23, 2022, day 212 of the war, end of the date update. as a heads up, there is not much going on military-wise or on the front lines, so it'll be a relatively short update. Also would like to mention a little bit about what's going on strategically. Russia is currently redirecting all of its we're talking about energy situation, all of the energy supplies, for example coal is being actively sold to China. So in August Russia sold 8.5 million tons of coal to China, and also they started selling actually pretty actively natural gas. There is definitely shortage of the infrastructure, specifically pipelines, the capacity, throughput capacity, but they increasing probably usage of the existing pipeline to a maximum. So they sold natural gas worth of $400 million to China in August as well. It's obviously not huge. It cannot replace the lost supplies to Europe, but at the same time, that's better something than nothing, as I say. Also, Russia has a problem in terms of its ability to export as LNG, basically. They essentially don't have LNG carriers, and they don't have really developed infrastructure, so they cannot do that either. There are rumors that there is some kind of basically interconnect with Iran, so then the natural gas can be sold through Iran. Don't know the whole details of that. That's probably all related to this deal that Russian president did with Iranian leadership, where Russia is getting all of this UAVs from Iran, which we see very a lot on the battlefield. So today was a day of extremely active attacks using UAVs. So in many ways, this is going to be much cheaper and easier way to attack targets on the Ukrainian side without using expensive rockets, because those rockets, caliber rockets, I don't know exact number, but they cost at least $3, $4, $5 million each. So they not they very expensive toys. Many targets can be hit, and there's enough damage can be done by using those UAVs, and especially those UAVs are not so tiny ones. So there was this Mojahid 136, which is Russian name, rebranded name is Gerain 2. And it's a smaller one, but there's a bigger one, which is called Gerain 1, and that one can carry, I think, up to 100 kilogram of explosives. And so they were actually they being used to attack target Ukrainian infrastructure and military infrastructure and so on. Just for the reference, the rocket has about a little bit less than 500 kilograms of explosive. I think it's 480 or 475, something like that. So that's just while it's not exactly, it's definitely less, but then it costs pretty much nothing. It's as cheap as what is dirt. I think that's how they say. So you can send 5 of them, 10 of them, even if out of 10, let's say 5 got lost, no big deal. They super cheap. So they sort of similar idea that's behind Orlan 10, where it's very cheap. It's meant not to last. It just very like sort of disposable tool, and that's at their extreme strengths. And so far, it looks like that the attacks sort of hit some targets, but because there is not enough information where sort of the actual like objects are, and basically Russia does not have good reconnaissance information about Ukrainian military objects. So they hit, but they didn't really hit really anything critical. At the same time, it's very clear that this is going to be used more and more actively as they're cheap to produce. Russia doesn't have a problem producing tons of a lot of explosives. Probably around the same. So as you can see, there's now more and more forming another sort of axis which is Iran, Russia, China. That's just sort of definitely a very clear tie there at this point. So now let's actually do a quick walk through the front line. Um, let's look what's going on overall. So the situation along the state border here, starting from the very north, is more or less the same. The activity is sort of subdued and relatively inactive in terms of artillery fire and so on. Now let's move and look what's going on here on North Luhansk section of the front line. Things here sort of stable at this point. There were some attacks again by Russian forces to remove Ukrainian bridgehead on the eastern side of Oskil River that were not successful. Uh, if For those who remember, who watched yesterday's video, there were some advances by Ukrainian forces. They enlarged the bridgehead yesterday. Today they apparently were regrouping. Regrouping essentially. So there were no major movement. Things are more or less the same. There is also information that potentially the Drobashova is being held by Russian ad hoc military unit, so it's not controlled by Ukrainian, and essentially Ukrainian units are trying to sort of bypass this Drobashova and sort of kind of continue movements in this direction. Situation is very fluid, so I just kind of share what's available without, because there's not enough sort of evidence, and so I just want to share sort of like verbally. If there's more evidence, I'll put it on the map. What is very clear is that at this point, Ukrainian side is controlling this sort of section of the bridgehead, and obviously here we know that from the past. But it looks like the plan of Ukrainian command is, as I said, to move towards Svatova and essentially either create uh, dangerous situation for Russian troops here in Liman and forced withdrawal, or actually encircle those troops. Uh, we don't think that the Russian command will allow encirclement based on what we've seen in Izium. They know how to quickly pull troops in the last second. Let's put it this way. But we'll see how where it all goes. So this is again just high big picture view here. So Ukrainian troops are advancing here. They essentially breached the Russian sort of defensive line here on the eastern side of Oskil and eastern side of Siversky Donetsk rivers. So this is just a question of time as Ukrainian troops kind of start advancing in this section will crumble. So far, based on this whole mobilization situation, it doesn't seem that you know that those troops are actively being brought to the front line yet. So it's probably another week up to a week of time, maybe a little bit more. Nobody knows for sure of that Ukrainian troops have to kind of make decisive breach in this area and make decisive advances that will be essentially make it useless for the Russian side to defend, and they would probably will be forced to sort of withdraw or potentially lose this whole North Luhansk territory. Remains to be seen, but that's very likely scenario. Now let's actually look what's going on North Donbas section of the front line. Things here are more or less the same. That Ukrainian side is trying to push here out of the salient around Spirne, and they pushing towards this oil refinery here, and also the goal is Lysychansk, and then the other one is going in direction of Berestove, and they apparently just would like to essentially destroy the salient, and then I guess then the move is sort of direction of kind of like Zoloteyrsk in this direction. At the same time, the Wagner's mercenaries continue some low-scale attacks here in Soledar, Bakhmut. Nothing major there. The same is sort of in the southern section, sort of relatively small-scale attacks. I guess the Russian logic of the Russian command, they hope that Ukrainian that they will get those reinforcements in time, so that this push by Wagner mercenaries here towards Vas is not going to be sort of lost, and it's not creating difficult position, because the situation up north will be stabilized and even maybe brought in the Russian favor with arrival of large quantity of reserves. Remains to be seen if that's true. Not if Russia will bring those reserves fast enough to the front line. And obviously, there's still huge question of the motivation. For sure, some units will be motivated. There is no question about it. But there will be a lot of number of units that are extremely poorly motivated, and maybe some ones that are sort of provisionally motivated right now. But once they get on the front line and they will see what kind of hell it is, because it's literally hell, especially in this sort of wintry and fall time when it's going to be double more difficult everything. And this will they may disintegrate pretty quickly, but we'll see what happens. And at this point, what's happening, what we're observing, is that all of this Russian conscripts, they are buying actively their own military equipment. Technically, in Ukrainian and Russian army, everything should be provided by the government, which they never do that. And the only thing that they provide is weapons and heavy weapons. The rest is essentially they provide uniform, but beyond that, you need to kind of like do your own things essentially, if you would like to be comfortable and sort of successful on the front line. So like binoculars or rifle scopes or night vision devices, that's totally or small drones, tactical drones, that's totally none of that is happening. And both armies don't get that. So it's all people essentially get from like relatives give money. They basically collect the villages, the towns, and all of that. So it's essentially the whole. You can see that sort of like, especially in Ukraine, because in Russia it wasn't really happening before, because it was kind of like sort of distant to most Russian citizens. In Ukraine, in case of Ukraine, it's the entire country participates, because the rears also providing money to buy all of this necessary sort of equipment to be successful on the battlefield. Now this is probably going to be happening something similar in Russia as well. Now let's move to central Donbas section of the front line. Things here sort of were a little bit more elevated relatively to yesterday, when there were no Russian attacks. So it's very clear that today the focus was Avdiivka. So as you can see, there were sort of focused attacks, trying to kind of eliminate the salient, which obviously didn't lead anywhere. The Russian troops just simply don't have any forces. Some attacks near Novokhalivka, but they are inconsequential. Now let's move to Zaporizhya front line. Things here totally stable, just reconnaissance, probing action, artillery. That's all it is. Now let's finish with the Kherson. bridgehead. Things here are more or less stable. There are some small scale action, as always, along this highway from Mykolaiv to Kherson without much success by either side. The Russian side is shelling heavily this bridgehead that Ukrainian side has. Ukraine still holds there. So essentially, no changes here. Some action in this area as well, but it's all relatively low scale. There's no sort of no large scale Ukrainian offensive or anything. Just more like a tactical sort of skirmishes essentially. Ukrainian forces continue attacking Russian ferries and pontoon bridges, and the supply is of supply of artillery, specifically shells, is getting sort of more and more strained. When sort of the thread will break, we don't know, but eventually it will. That's all. That's all. That's very clear about this. Essentially, these whole troops are trapped on the uh, on the on the western side of the Dnipro River. The only sort of saving opportunity what we can foresee if they survive till let's say December somehow, then the river freezes. Maybe not, depending also on the weather. If they may this may create opportunities. I don't even know if that's possible. If that because it's actually in the south of Ukraine, so I'm not even sure if it's kind of like really freezes there enough. But they can sort of transport using sort of over the ice. But this is very extremely low probability scenario, anyways, by now. So going actually. I want to add a little bit more about this Iranian UAVs. Is that doesn't look like Ukraine has adequate response to it or adequate tools to shut them down because they kind of fall in this category where they are too small for conventional anti-air defense systems, and then and for radars they not big enough, and they also made from wood and those kind of materials that don't have they don't sort of they're not terribly visible in on radars, let's put this way. So this is going to be a challenge actually going forward for Ukrainian side to actually destroy those successfully, and things that might be useful in this case actually those Gepard systems that Ukraine got from Germany. I think Ukraine got 15 of those, but the problem is you need a lot of those, and the scale of use of those Iranian UAVs is gonna only increase in our opinion because they can be made as I said before, as the sausages. And that's sort of deadly sausages. So as time sort of passes by and progresses, Ukraine will need to develop some sort of tools, or it's going to significantly hamper Ukraine's ability to sort of advance right now on the battlefield. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.